They say that looking back makes everything clear. And God, do I see it now. I see all the signs laid out as clearly as a map. But back then I was so blind, so consumed by the illusion of happiness that I couldn't, or maybe wouldn't, see the truth staring me right in the face. I guess that's the insidious thing about betrayal, isn't it? It doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It creeps in slowly, subtly, like a thief in the night. Sarah and I, we had what I thought was a fairy tale romance. We met at a coffee shop, cliché I know. I spilled hot coffee all over her favorite white blouse. I was mortified. She laughed it off. That laugh, it was infectious. Bright, bubbly, like sunshine after a long winter. We talked for hours that day, and I knew almost instantly that she was something special. We were young, ambitious, full of dreams. I was just starting out in my career. She was finishing her degree in art history. We were each other's biggest cheerleaders, pushing each other to be better, to reach for the stars. We traveled, we laughed, we cried, we built a life together, brick by brick. Our wedding day, it was perfect. A small ceremony, surrounded by family and close friends. Sarah looked radiant in her white dress, her eyes sparkling with joy. I remember standing at the altar, holding her hand, and feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I had found my soulmate. I had found my forever. The first few years of our marriage were bliss. We bought a little house in the suburbs, adopted a goofy golden retriever named Max, and settled into a comfortable routine. We had dinner together every night, talked about our days, and made plans for the future. We were a team, a partnership, a love story in the making. We weren't perfect, of course. We had our disagreements, our squabbles, our moments of doubt. But we always worked through them, always found our way back to each other. Communication was key, we always said. We were honest with each other, open about our feelings, and committed to making our marriage work. Or so I thought. Looking back, I realized that's where I started to fail. I became complacent. I took our relationship for granted. I assumed that everything was fine, that our love was strong enough to withstand anything. I stopped paying attention to the little things, the subtle nuances in Sarah's behavior. I was so focused on my career, on providing for our future, that I neglected the most important thing, her. I remember thinking, we've made it. We're secure. We're happy. I told myself that our love was a well-tended garden, that it would continue to flourish without constant care. How wrong I was. Love, like any living thing, needs nurturing, needs attention, needs constant tending. And I let our garden run wild. There were signs, of course. Subtle shifts in her demeanor, small changes in her routine. But I dismissed them, chalked them up to stress, to fatigue, to the pressures of modern life. I was too busy, too self-absorbed, to notice that Sarah was slowly slipping away from me. Was that happiness really as sustainable as I thought? Was I too complacent? Did I become the kind of husband she deserved? These are the questions that haunt me now, that keep me up at night. Because the truth is, I let my guard down. I let my marriage become vulnerable. And that's when the thief came in and stole what was most precious to me. And it all started with a new friend at work. A friendship that, in hindsight, was anything but a new friend. God, even saying it now feels like a punch to the gut. It sounds so innocent, so harmless. A new colleague, a work acquaintance, someone to grab coffee with during lunch breaks. But friend? That word carries so much weight now, so much baggage. It's a constant reminder of my naivete, of my inability to see what was right in front of me. His name was Mark. Sarah started mentioning him around, I'd say about 6 months after he started at her company. They worked in different departments, but apparently, they bonded over a shared love of art. He was a graphic designer, she, of course, an art historian. I even remember thinking, that's great, she's finally found someone at work who shares her passion. I was actually happy for her. Pathetic, isn't it? At first, it was just casual mentions. Mark said the funniest thing today. Mark recommended this amazing new exhibit. Mark's really talented, you should see his work. I didn't think anything of it. I mean, she had work friends before. It's normal, right? To connect with people you spend 40 hours a week with? But then the mentions started to become more frequent, more personal. She started talking about his background, his family, his dreams. She knew more about him than I knew about some of my own colleagues. And she talked about him with a certain enthusiasm that I hadn't heard in a while. I remember one evening we were having dinner and she was telling me about a project Mark was working on. She was practically glowing, her eyes shining with excitement. I found myself feeling a little jealous. Not in a possessive, controlling way, but in a longing kind of way. I missed that spark in her eyes when she talked about me. And then there were the late nights at the office. Just finishing up a project with Mark. she'd say, her voice a little too casual, a little too rehearsed. I never questioned it. I trusted her implicitly. I worked late myself sometimes, so I understood the demands of her job. But looking back, I should have been more suspicious. I should have asked more questions. I should have paid closer attention to the subtle clues. The way she avoided eye contact when she mentioned his name. The way she'd quickly change the subject if I asked about him. The way her phone would light up with messages late at night, and she'd quickly turn away, hiding the screen from me. There was one incident that sticks out in my mind. It was a Friday night, and we were supposed to go out to dinner with another couple. Sarah called me in the afternoon, saying she had to stay late at work to finish a presentation with Mark. I was disappointed, but I understood. I told her to have a good night and promised to save her some leftovers. Later that evening, I was scrolling through Instagram and saw a picture posted by one of Sarah's colleagues. It was a group photo from a bar, and there was Sarah laughing and smiling with her arm around, you guessed it, Mark. I felt a knot form in my stomach. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was more like confusion, disappointment, a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. I told myself it was just a harmless night out with colleagues, that I was being paranoid, insecure, that I needed to trust my wife. I didn't say anything to Sarah that night. I waited for her to come home, and when she did, she looked tired and stressed. She apologized for missing dinner and said the presentation had taken longer than expected. I just nodded, forcing a smile. I didn't want to start a fight. I didn't want to confront her with my suspicions. I was afraid of what she might say. But inside, the seed of doubt had been planted. The comfortable illusion of my perfect marriage had begun to crack. And the new friend, at work, he was the wedge that was slowly but surely driving us apart. That was sign number one. The subtle, seemingly insignificant beginning of the end. And I completely missed it. After the incident with the Instagram photo, I started paying closer attention. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, afraid to say or do anything that might upset Sarah. And that's when I started noticing the late-night texts. It would usually happen after we had gone to bed. I'd be drifting off to sleep, and then I'd hear the faint ding of her phone. I'd open my eyes and see her illuminated by the screen, her fingers typing furiously. At first, I assumed it was work-related. Maybe she was dealing with an urgent email or a client issue. But then I noticed that she never mentioned these late-night work sessions to me. And she always seemed to be smiling or even giggling while she was texting. It didn't seem like work at all. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I pretended to wake up and asked her who she was texting. She jumped, startled, and quickly turned off her phone. "Oh, it's just Lisa," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched, a little too defensive. Lisa was one of her colleagues, a woman I'd met a few times. I didn't particularly like her, but I had no reason to suspect anything. "What's Lisa texting you about at 11 o'clock at night?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Oh, just, girl stuff," she said, avoiding eye contact. "Just complaining about her boyfriend." I didn't believe her. I could see the lie in her eyes. But I didn't push it. I didn't want to start a fight. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was letting my insecurities get the better of me. But the late-night texts continued. Night after night, the faint ding of her phone would pierce the silence of our bedroom, a constant reminder of my growing suspicion. I started sneaking glances at her phone when she wasn't looking. I knew it was wrong, that I was invading her privacy. But I couldn't help myself. I needed to know the truth. I never saw anything incriminating. She was always careful to delete her messages. But I did notice that she had started password protecting her phone. She'd never done that before. And she always kept it face down, as if she was afraid I might see something I wasn't supposed to. The more I suspected, the more distant she became. She was less affectionate, less communicative, less present. It was like she was physically there but emotionally miles away. I tried to talk to her about it, but she always brushed me off. "You're being paranoid," she'd say. "You're imagining things. You need to trust me." And I wanted to trust her. God, I wanted to believe that I was wrong, that my fears were unfounded. But the late-night texts, the secret phone calls, the evasive answers, they were all adding up. One night, I woke up to use the bathroom. Sarah was asleep, her phone lying face down on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a notification. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I shouldn't do it. I knew it was a violation of her trust. But I couldn't resist. I picked up her phone and carefully swiped to unlock it. I knew her password. It was our anniversary date. I quickly scrolled through her messages, searching for anything that might confirm my suspicions. And then I saw it. A message from Mark. It was just a simple text, nothing overtly romantic. But it was the time that caught my eye. It was 2:30 in the morning. The message read, "Couldn't sleep. Thinking about our conversation earlier. Hope you're doing okay." That was it. That was the moment my world tilted on its axis. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that something was going on between Sarah and Mark. The late-night texts, they weren't just girl stuff. They were a secret connection, a hidden world that I wasn't a part of. And I was starting to realize that I might never be again. After reading that text message, sleep was impossible. I tossed and turned for hours, replaying every conversation, every interaction with Sarah in my mind. I was trying to make sense of it all, to find some logical explanation for what was happening. But there was no explanation. The only conclusion I could reach was the one I had been dreading all along. Sarah was having an affair with Mark. The next morning I was a mess. I couldn't eat, I couldn't focus, I couldn't stop thinking about them together. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and pretend that everything was fine. I decided to start following Sarah. I know it sounds crazy even now. It's something you see in movies, not something real people do. But I was desperate. I needed to know the truth even if it meant crossing a line. It started small. I'd leave for work a little earlier than usual and park down the street from our house, just to see if she left at a different time than she said she would. I'd call her at random times during the day just to see if she answered. It was pathetic, I know. But I felt like I was losing control of my life. I was desperate to regain some sense of power, some sense of understanding. One day I decided to take it a step further. I took a day off work and followed Sarah to her office. I parked across the street and watched her walk inside. Then I waited. Hours passed. I sat in my car, listening to the radio, trying to distract myself from the gnawing anxiety that was eating me alive. Finally, around lunchtime, I saw her leave the building. And she wasn't alone. She was with Mark. They walked down the street, laughing and talking like two teenagers on a first date. They stopped at a small cafe and went inside. I sat in my car, frozen. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront them? Should I follow them? Should I just drive away and pretend that I hadn't seen anything? I decided to follow them. I parked my car down the street from the cafe and watched them through the window. They were sitting close together, their heads bent towards each other, their hands occasionally touching. I felt a surge of anger, a wave of jealousy washing over me. I wanted to burst into the cafe and scream at them, to demand answers, to tear them apart. But I didn't. I couldn't. I was too afraid of what might happen. I stayed there for hours, watching them, my heart breaking a little more with each passing minute. Finally, they left the cafe and walked back to Sarah's office. I followed them back to my car, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep living like this, consumed by suspicion and jealousy. It was destroying me. That evening, I decided to try a different approach. I decided to talk to Sarah. I knew it was risky, that she might deny everything, but I felt like I had no other choice. I waited for her to come home from work, and when she did, I tried to act normal. We had dinner, we watched TV, we talked about our days. But underneath the surface, the tension was palpable. Finally, after the kids were in bed, I took a deep breath and said, "Sarah, we need to talk." She looked at me, her eyes wide with apprehension. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I know about you and Mark," I said, my voice trembling. Her face went white. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me, her eyes filled with fear. That was the moment the dam broke. That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment my life began to unravel. The silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. Sarah just stood there, her face ashen, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and, what? Guilt? Shame? I couldn't tell. What are you talking about?" she finally stammered, her voice barely audible. "I saw you, Sarah," I said, my voice shaking. "I saw you with him. At the cafe. Today." She looked away, avoiding my gaze. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, Sarah," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "Please just tell me the truth." She took a deep breath and finally looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice trembling. "Then what is it, Sarah?" I demanded, my voice rising. "What is going on between you and Mark?" She hesitated for a moment, then burst into tears. "It just happened," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "What happened, Sarah?" I pressed, my voice cold. She looked at me, her eyes filled with desperation. We kissed," she whispered. "Just kissed? That's what she gives me?" I thought. All the signs I ignored, now a kiss? Kiss. That was her explanation. A simple kiss? After all the late-night texts, the secret phone calls, the lunches together, the Everything? I felt a surge of anger, a wave of betrayal washing over me. A kiss. I yelled, my voice shaking with rage. That's all you have to say? A kiss. She flinched at my tone. It was just a mistake, she cried. It didn't mean anything. A mistake. I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. A mistake you made multiple times? A mistake you hid from me? A mistake you lied about? She didn't answer. She just stood there, sobbing, her face buried in her hands. I wanted to scream, to yell, to break things. I wanted to unleash all the rage and pain that was boiling inside me. But I couldn't. I was too numb, too shocked, too heartbroken. I just stood there, staring at her, my mind reeling. Everything I thought I knew about my wife, about our marriage, about our life together, was crumbling before my eyes. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, the woman I had built a life with, she had betrayed me. She had broken my heart. She had shattered my world. How could you do this to me, Sarah? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. How could you do this to us? She looked up at me, her eyes filled with remorse. I don't know, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I couldn't understand. I couldn't grasp how someone who claimed to love me could inflict so much pain. It made no sense. Is that all? I asked. Just a kiss. She looked at me and I knew I would not like what came out of her mouth. No, she said, tears pouring down her face. It has been going on since the retreat. That was when the irrefutable evidence came to light. The betrayal became clear. The world of lies had been revealed. I felt I was going to pass out. I did not know what to do. I stood there for what felt like an eternity as Sarah and I cried. I just couldn't believe it. I did not know what to do next. Since the retreat. Her words echoed in my head, a constant, sickening loop. The retreat. A work conference she had attended a few months earlier. She had told me how boring it was, how she couldn't wait to get back home. She had lied straight to my face. What do you mean, since the retreat? I asked, my voice dangerously low. What happened at the retreat, Sarah? She sobbed harder, burying her face in her hands. We slept together, she choked out. Just that one time. It didn't mean anything. Just that one time. There it was again. The minimizing, the downplaying, the attempt to lessen the impact of her actions. As if sleeping with another man was a trivial matter, a minor indiscretion. One time. I repeated, my voice rising again. You slept with him one time at the retreat and then you just forgot about it? You came home, pretended to be my wife, and never said a word. She shook her head, her body racked with sobs. I was going to tell you, she said. I swear I was. But I was so ashamed. I didn't know how. So instead you just continued the affair? I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. Is that it, Sarah? You were too ashamed to tell me the truth, so you just kept sleeping with him? She didn't answer. She couldn't. How long, Sarah? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. How long has this been going on? She hesitated for a moment, then said, a few months. A few months. All those late nights, all those secret phone calls, all those stolen moments, all those lies. A few months, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. And you expected me to just, what? Not notice? Not care. Just accept that my wife was sleeping with another man. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. I love you, she said. I never stopped loving you. This was just a mistake, a moment of weakness. It didn't mean anything. If it didn't mean anything, Sarah, I said, my voice trembling, then why did you do it? Why did you risk everything we have? Why did you betray me? She didn't have an answer. She couldn't explain. I felt invisible, she finally said, her voice barely audible. Like you didn't see me anymore. Like you didn't care about me. Invisible? Was that it? I did everything for us, but I felt like I had not done a single thing. I paid the bills, cooked the food, and took care of the kids. What else was there to do? So you decided to have an affair? I asked, incredulous. That's how you decided to make yourself visible? By sleeping with another man? I stood in shock for what seemed like an eternity. It just didn't make any sense. I thought she loved me. I thought she was happy. I thought we had a good life. I did not see any other outcome for the two of us. And I could not even begin to pretend that what was happening was all a terrible dream. We argued all night, each of us saying hurtful and painful things. It was just a horrible end to a horrible day. I just could not believe what was happening to us. After the shouting stopped, after the tears subsided, there was only silence. A cold, empty silence that filled the house, suffocating me. Sarah and I just sat there, staring at each other, two strangers in a familiar room. The woman I loved was still there, physically present, but the person I thought I knew, the person I had shared my life with, was gone. Replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of betrayal and deceit. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, numb, trying to process the enormity of what had just happened. My wife had cheated on me. My marriage was a lie. My life was in ruins. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I stood up. "I need to leave," I said, my voice flat. Sarah looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "I just can't be here right now." I grabbed my keys and wallet and walked out the door, leaving Sarah alone in the wreckage of our marriage. I drove aimlessly for hours, not knowing where I was going or what I was doing. I just needed to escape, to get away from the pain, the anger, the overwhelming sense of loss. I ended up at a bar, a dark, smoky dive that I had never been to before. I sat in a corner booth, nursing a whiskey, trying to numb the pain. The bar was crowded and noisy, filled with people laughing and talking, oblivious to the turmoil that was raging inside me. I felt like I was on the outside looking in, watching a movie of someone else's life. I stayed there for hours, drinking and thinking, replaying the events of the night in my mind. The confrontation, the confession, the heartbreak. It all felt like a bad dream. I could not sleep when I eventually returned home. When the kids asked where Mom was, I told them she was working on something. I didn't want to tell them the truth. I didn't want to shatter their world, to rob them of their innocence. They were too young to understand the complexities of infidelity, the pain of betrayal. I tossed and turned for most of the day, unable to find peace or comfort. I was so tired that my body ached. Finally, as night approached, I dozed off, and that's when the nightmares began. I saw Sarah with Mark, laughing and touching, their faces filled with joy. I saw my wedding day, my wife in her beautiful white dress, but her face was blurred, distorted, like a funhouse mirror. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. I was shaking, trembling, consumed by fear and anxiety. I got out of bed and walked to the window, looking out at the dark, empty street. The world was quiet, peaceful, unaware of the chaos that was brewing inside me. That night, I realized that my life would never be the same. That the woman I loved had destroyed something that could never be rebuilt. And that I was alone, adrift in a sea of heartbreak, with no idea how to navigate the storm. The days that followed were a blur of confusion, anger, and grief. Sarah and I barely spoke. We lived in the same house, but we were worlds apart, separated by a chasm of betrayal and distrust. I couldn't look at her without feeling a surge of anger, a wave of resentment washing over me. I couldn't touch her without feeling disgusted, repulsed. The woman I loved had become a stranger, an enemy. I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, trapped in a marriage that was built on lies and deceit. But I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to try to rebuild our marriage, to give her another chance. We had been together for so long, we had built a life together, we had children to consider. Could I just throw all of that away? But another part of me couldn't forgive her. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too raw. I couldn't trust her anymore. I couldn't shake the image of her with Mark, laughing and touching, their faces filled with joy. The fact that she could do that after all we built together made me so frustrated. I didn't know this person. I thought about separation. We could live apart, give each other space to heal, to figure out what we wanted. But I knew that separation was just a stepping stone to divorce. It was a temporary solution to a permanent problem. The time apart would solve nothing. I thought about divorce. A clean break, a fresh start. I could walk away from the pain, the anger, the betrayal. I could find someone new, someone who would appreciate me, someone who would never lie to me. But the thought of divorce terrified me. It meant admitting failure, admitting that my marriage was over, admitting that I had lost everything. It meant hurting my children, disrupting their lives, tearing our family apart. My kids knew things were off, but they did not know why. We had to tell them at some point, but I felt it was important to make a choice before we began to involve them with the details. I talked to my friends, my family, my therapist. Everyone had an opinion, everyone had advice to offer. But ultimately the decision was mine. You need to do what's right for you, my best friend told me. You need to do what will make you happy. But what would make me happy? I didn't know anymore. I felt like I had lost myself, that I didn't even know who I was anymore. I spent hours lying awake at night, wrestling with these questions. What did I want? What did Sarah want? What was best for our children? Could we rebuild our marriage? Could we learn to trust each other again? Could we find our way back to the love we once shared? Or was it too late? Had the damage been done? Was our marriage beyond repair? One evening, I sat down with Sarah and said, We need to talk. We need to decide what we're going to do. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. I want to fix this, she said. I want to save our marriage. I know I messed up, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. I looked at her, searching her eyes for some sign of sincerity, some glimmer of hope. But all I saw was pain, regret, and a desperate plea for forgiveness. And I realized that I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. I didn't know if I could ever love her the same way. But I knew that I had to try. For our children, for our family, for the memory of the love we once shared. I knew I had to at least give it a chance. But where does someone even start? Deciding to try, that was the easy part. Actually trying to rebuild our marriage, that was a whole different story. It was like trying to piece together a shattered vase, knowing that it would never be quite the same, that the cracks would always be visible. We started with therapy. Individual therapy for both of us, to deal with our own individual issues, and couples therapy, to learn how to communicate again, how to rebuild trust, how to heal the wounds of betrayal. Therapy was hard. It forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and about our relationship. It forced us to dig deep, to examine our own motivations, to take responsibility for our own actions. Sarah had to confront the reasons why she cheated, the feelings of invisibility and neglect that had driven her into Mark's arms. She had to understand the damage she had inflicted not just on me but on our children, on our family. I had to confront my own complacency, my own failure to see her, to appreciate her, to give her the attention and affection she needed. I had to learn to forgive her, not just for her sake but for my own. The couples therapy sessions were particularly brutal. We spent hours arguing, crying, rehashing old wounds and confronting new ones. It felt like we were tearing each other apart rather than building each other up. It was not easy. I was a man with a broken heart and a very hurt ego. She was remorseful, but I felt it was too late for it to make much of a difference. The therapist told us what we needed to do. We had to be honest with each other, no matter how painful the truth might be. We had to be vulnerable, to share our feelings, our fears, our insecurities. We had to learn to listen to each other, to empathize with each other, to understand each other. But most of all, we had to forgive each other. Forgiveness, that was the hardest part. How could I forgive Sarah for what she had done? How could I forget the image of her with Mark? How could I ever trust her again? Sarah told me that she ended things with Mark. However, that trust was shattered. Took time, but I did my best. We started dating each other again, going out to dinner, seeing movies, taking walks in the park. We tried to recreate the spark that had drawn us together in the first place. We started spending more time together as a family, doing things that we all enjoyed. We went on vacation, we had picnics, we played games. We tried to create new memories to replace the painful ones. Slowly, gradually, things started to improve. The anger subsided, the pain lessened, the trust started to rebuild. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, times when I wondered if we were just fooling ourselves. But we kept at it. We kept talking, we kept listening, we kept forgiving. And over time, the cracks in our marriage started to fill in. The vase was still shattered, but it was holding together. I did not know at the time, but I could not go back to who I used to be. Now, I am on the other side of a terrible affair. She is still my wife, and I am trying to reconcile what happened. It is very difficult, but I wanted my kids to grow up with a mom and dad in the same house. But where does one even go from there? The damage has been done, but I am fighting every single day. It's been 5 years since I discovered Sarah's affair. 5 years since my world was turned upside down. 5 years of therapy, soul-searching, and hard work. And where are we now? Well, we're still together. Sarah is still my wife. We're still living in the same house, raising our children, navigating the ups and downs of life. But things are different. They'll always be different. The trust is still fragile. There are moments when I find myself questioning her, doubting her, wondering if she's being honest with me. The seed of doubt has been planted, and it's hard to eradicate it completely. I cannot forget. I will never forget. But I have learned to forgive. Not just Sarah, but myself. I've learned to accept that the past cannot be changed, that all we can do is learn from it and move forward. We still have our struggles. There are times when the pain resurfaces, when the anger flares up, when the temptation to give up becomes overwhelming. But we keep talking. We keep listening. We keep forgiving. And we've learned some valuable lessons along the way. We've learned that communication is key. That we need to be honest with each other even when it's difficult. That we need to share our feelings, our fears, our insecurities. We've learned that love requires effort. That it's not enough to just say, "I love you." We need to show it, every day, in small and meaningful ways. We are much more intentional. We've learned that vulnerability is strength. That it's okay to be open and honest about our weaknesses, our flaws, our imperfections. We've learned that forgiveness is not a one-time event. It's a process, a journey that requires constant effort and commitment. And we've learned that life is unpredictable. That things can change in an instant. That we need to appreciate what we have, while we have it. Looking back, I see all the red flags I ignored. The subtle shifts in Sarah's behavior, the late-night texts, the secret phone calls, the evasive answers, they were all warning signs that I chose to overlook. I ignored them because I was complacent, because I was afraid of what I might find, because I didn't want to believe that my marriage was in trouble. I just didn't care. I will not do it again. I will make sure I always care. I don't know what the future holds for us. I don't know if our marriage will last, but I do know that I am committed to trying. I am committed to working on myself, to working on our relationship, to creating a life that is filled with love, trust, and honesty. If you're watching this and you're going through something similar, know that you're not alone. Infidelity is a devastating experience, but it doesn't have to be the end of your world. You can survive it. You can heal. You can find happiness again, whether it's with your partner or on your own. Just don't ignore the red flags. Pay attention to the subtle clues. Trust your gut. And never, ever take your relationship for granted. Because love is precious, love is fragile, and love is worth fighting for.